Hi, everyone, and welcome to Blueprint for Success, Operationalizing Your Graduate Portrait. So today we'll explore how a portrait of a graduate or your portrait of a learner can become a lived, actionable experience in schools and classrooms. But first, I want to say happy National Teacher Appreciation Week, right?
Yes.
So shout out to all of the teachers in the room and across the country that are doing the world's most important work. I like to say those who can do, those who can do more teach. And so happy Teacher Appreciation Week, everyone. And so our time today is going to be about really aligning vision. It's going to be about implementing the conditions for learning, and it's going to be about operationalizing systems to move from poster to practice to positive impact. And we're thrilled to have Jeanine Collins and Dr. Shawn Wightman join us today for this conversation. A little bit more about them later. But first, I want to say thank you for saying yes. So, yes to being here at this time in the school year, yes to being here at this point, yes to reflecting on your practice, and yes for just allowing yourself permission to learn, unlearn, or even relearn something with us together today. And so, with that, Jasmine, can you just talk about a few logistics before we get started?
Absolutely. And I just want to chime in, learn, unlearn, and relearn. It's my favorite. We approach every day like that. Learn, unlearn, relearn. So thank you so much, Dr. Marion. Before we get started, just a few quick logistics so you know what to expect from our time together. So today's session is a short 60 minutes. So please feel free to use the Q&A box throughout the session. We will try our very best to leave time at the end to address questions as we can. And you'll also receive access to resources connected to today's learning so you can continue exploring these ideas. So, with that in mind, let's begin by grounding ourselves in the purpose of today's conversation. Now, Dr. Marion, we brought him in here. We're already asking him questions already. already.
Once a teacher, always a teacher, right?
Absolutely. So, when you hear Portrait of a Graduate, what is one word that comes to mind? When you hear Portrait of a Graduate, what is one word that comes to mind? We would love for you to drop that one word in the chat box. This is our first opportunity to engage with the chat. So when you hear Portrait of a Graduate, what is one word that comes to mind? Career success. Yes. Thank you so much for engaging in the chat. Yes. Absolutely. I will start by modeling as well. I would say if I were still in the classroom or even thinking about my school age children and having these conversations with them, my word would be resilient. How about you, Dr. Marion?
I would say like prepared or future ready.
Yes, future ready. Yes, absolutely. Thank you all for sharing. So, as you think about those words, I want you to notice something. They can oftentimes be deemed as aspirational, right? So the opportunity today is move these words from aspiration into daily lived experiences. So what would students actually experience if those words were alive in our classrooms every day, alive in our conversations, and even in our reflections? So thank you all so much for engaging and starting with that quick post check around what is that one word that comes to mind. But now we're going to move on and we have another question for you. So once a teacher, always a teacher. So now I want you to take a moment and look at this visual. This is an oldie, but a goodie, but it's powerful for grounding us in this work. I want you to think about your own learning community as you look at this. Look at all the blobs on the screen and their numbers. Where are you right now when it comes to your portrait of a graduate? Is your portrait mostly known? Is it clearly communicated? Is it showing up in the classrooms? Is it connected to student evidence and reflection? There is no wrong answer here. This is simply a moment to locate ourselves before we move into the work of operationalizing. So here's what I would like you to do. Take a look at this visual and choose the number that best represents where your school or your district is right now and type that into the chat as well. So I'm already seeing some responses come in so far. 16, 2, 6, 1, 8. Yes, I love it. I love it. And as you're seeing those range of responses come in, this is what we expect. Different starting points, and that is okay. Different contexts, but all moving forward towards the same goal. So now that we've grounded ourselves in where we are, let's take a step back for a second and ground ourselves in what we mean when we say portrait of a graduate. Dr. Marion, can you help us here?
Absolutely, Jasmine. And so, what is exactly a portrait of a graduate, right? Simplistically stated, We like to say that a portrait of a graduate is not simply a communication tool,
Mm.
right? It's a system-wide commitment. It names what our community believes students should know, what they should demonstrate, and what they should carry with them beyond graduation. But the real question is not whether the portrait actually exists. The question is whether students experience it. So we're asking questions like, how does it shape instruction? How does it shape feedback? Like, how does it shape how students understand themselves and their growth? So today we want to move from just this calibrated definition to actually creating those conditions for learning that move beyond grades, that is really focused on being future ready, and it makes learning visible, reflective, and meaningful over time. And we're actually going to do this by exploring a few different areas. And so during our time together, you'll stand ready to do four things. The first is you'll be able to bridge the gap by saying how to connect your district or your state portrait vision to actual daily classroom practices. Next, we'll have an opportunity to explore asset-based learning by using strengths-based data to understand and design how to personalize learning for each student, shifting from that deficit mindset or model to an asset-based approach to the work. Third, you'll have an opportunity to identify specific strategies that may be able to help you scale some of those whole child approaches to support the district-wide portrait work. And lastly, you'll be exposed to a learner-centered digital portfolio that's going to help you document, track, assess, and make visible student growth of those portrait-aligned skills in real time and over time. But I want to
Mm.
emphasize something very clearly. We want to say that this is not about adding something new to your work. I'll say that again. This is
Yeah.
not about adding something new to your work. It is really about strengthening what you're already doing and possibly thinking about it in a different way. So, with this
Yes.
understanding, what's next? So,
Let's
Jasmine and I, no, I know Jasmine get excited about like how we move this forward, right?
yes.
And so
Let's
Jasmine and I are going to serve as your host, and we're just going to frame the Thrively approaches and what we've been learning from schools and school districts across the country. And our special guests are going to help us ground this work in state, district, and school-based experiences. So we're going to frame the vision, we're going to frame the system, and share some of those initial resources. But we've learned over time that the power is learning from practitioners who are leading this work daily. So with this, we're excited to be joined by two leaders who bring powerful perspectives to this conversation. I want to welcome Dr. Shawn Wightman, Superintendent of Roosevelt Union Free School District, and Jeanine Collins, the co-founder and Chief Impact Officer of the Center for the Future of Learning. So Dr. Wightman, can you take a moment just to introduce yourself to everyone and to share a little bit about Roosevelt Union Free School District?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Smith. Listen, happy Cinco de Mayo to everyone here right now. Just a little bit of background information about Roosevelt School District. We're in Nassau County here in New York off Long Island. We're one of over 50 school districts in the county. We're a very large county here in New York. We're a very diverse district. In this district that I work for right now, we have over 65% of our students are Hispanic Latino, and 35% of our student population here is African American. Um, we're dealing with all sorts of things, just like everybody else around the country and everything here in Roosevelt, focusing in again on graduation requirements, Regents examinations, and we're very, very proud of our work and everything. But the thing I'll also tell you is one of the challenges that we're facing right now, of course, is dealing with, immigration issues and the like. So we're navigating through all of this right now. We've been very successful in the work since me being here. This is my second year here in the district of approximately 3,500 students. So having said that and everything, I'm grateful to be a part of this webinar with everyone here and of course, joining everyone with the Thrively work that's being done around the country.
No, thank you for that, Dr. Whiteman. And Jeanine, can you also take a moment to introduce yourself and to share a little bit about your work and the Center for the Future of Learning?
Absolutely. Good morning, everybody, and good afternoon, depending on where you're joining this call from. It's so wonderful to be with you. I am coming to you from the great state of Nevada, where I co lead an organization called the Center for the Future of Learning. We are a statewide intermediary that supports community, districts, policymakers, educators, young people coming together to build the future of learning in our state together. A little bit about Nevada. Nevada. We have 17 districts, including charter here in Nevada. We are home to the fifth largest school district, which is the Clark County School District. And if I am not mistaken, we are also home to Esmeralda County, which I think is the smallest school district in the country at under 100 students. And so when we talk about connecting diverse communities together, we are talking urban, suburban, rural, frontier. We have incredible Indigenous communities across the state. And this work that I'm so excited to talk with you about today has been a true catalyst for helping us talk together about the things that matter and begin to build right there at the intersection of community policy and practice.
No, thank you for that, Jeanine. And so we are excited to have both of you joining us today. And you see just vast experiences and perspectives and different insights that are going to fuel our conversation. And so I like to say, whether it's from the boardroom to the classroom to all things in between, it's all about being able to understand how to really move this work forward and how to remain in community with one another. But what we've learned is we continue to surface a few things around this work. And so, Jasmine, can you talk to us a little bit about what we're seeing and what we're learning in this space?
Absolutely, Dr. Marion. This is the gap that we see. Portraits are clearly defined, but not consistently experiences. So practice vary across all of our classrooms, and impact is difficult to measure. So this is the problem that we are solving, from poster to practice to positive impact. This is where Thrively becomes more than a learner-centered platform. This is our answer to operationalizing the portrait. Our core four gives schools a way to move from broad competencies to measurable, student-centered conditions for learning. Strengths help students know who they are. Well-being helps educators understand how students are feeling and how they are functioning. Hope helps students see their goals, their agency, and their pathways. And then connections reminds us that learning is absolutely relational. So together, these conditions create the foundation for portrait-aligned work and the growth that lives there. So again, this is where our conditions for learning come in. This is our answer. Now, the challenge is not defining the portrait, contrary to popular belief. That's not the challenge. The challenge is making it real for every student every single day. So, Dr. Marion, can you walk us through how this comes to life in practice through our work?
No, sure. And so I know what some people might be thinking, Jasmine, as I'm listening. We've been a part of this work for quite some time. Most people might be saying, this all sounds great, but so what now what, right? Like, how do I
Mhm.
make this a reality in my actual context, especially with everything else that I'm already juggling? And as Jasmine pointed out, we've taken the research and we've turned it into a framework that you can actually implement, support, and operationalize. I'll say those three again: implement, support, and operationalize. As Jasmine noted, it's the core four. So, four enabling conditions for learning. So, as you think about your current work and listen to the conversation today, we invite you to reflect on these four conditions for learning and how you may begin to maximize each in your system. So, condition one is we build positive self identity in every learner by helping them recognize their unique innate strengths through our industry first strengths assessment. So, this is really the foundation of self knowledge, which becomes the catalyst for everything else. Condition number two is we support psychological well being, focusing on how students are feeling and functioning using a well-being index. So it's quick, it's research-based, and it actually gives educators real insight into a student's internal world in less than the amount of time it takes to take daily attendance. Condition three is we instill hope. And when we talk about hope, it's not as an emotion, but it's as a cognitive measurable trait. So through the Hope Survey, we help students and adults actually develop both agency and pathways towards their goals. And condition number four, we help build authentic connections because we've learned through the research that deep, meaningful relationships are the foundation for trust, learning, and growth. Again, these aren't just nice ideas. This is not just the Thrively way, but they're actionable, measurable, and rooted in science. And so in the chat, we'll place a link to a one pager that's going to provide you additional information about the conditions for learning and the research behind our whole child assessments.
I love that. Thank you so much, Dr. Marion, for digging and just going a little bit deeper around our conditions for learning. So before we keep going, I know there was a lot of information, a wealth of information. So we want to give you an opportunity to pause, to think, and reflect. So as you think about those four conditions for learning, strengths, hope, well-being, and connections, which one is currently the strongest in your system? And which one represents your greatest opportunity for growth? I want you to sit with that for just a second, just reflect on that. Which one is currently the strongest in your system? And which one represents your greatest opportunity for growth? The goal is not to evaluate where you are. The goal is to actually identify where you can actually begin. So, as you reflect, what you're naming or identifying is exactly the work, moving from insight to action. Insight to action. So, what we consistently hear from our educators is not a lack of belief in this work. It's not. Educators believe in student strengths. They believe in agency. They believe students should graduate with more than academic credits. The challenge is consistency. How do we make this visible across all of our classrooms for all of our students? How do we support teachers without adding one more disconnected initiative? We say it all the time here at Thrively. It's not one more thing to do, it is the thing to do. That's where clear data, aligned practices, and a visible evidence system becomes absolutely critical to this work. And when we start with condition for learning, number one, strengths, this is where the work begins. This is where the work begins. So, strengths based data changes the starting point for us. Instead of beginning with what students are missing, we begin with what students bring to the table. And that shift matters because it gives educators a more complete picture of the learner and it gives students the language to actually understand who they are, how they learn, and where they can grow. This is where we move from deficit based thinking to identity based learning, from asking what's wrong to asking a much more powerful question that you see here on the screen. What's strong with you? So powerful. Simple statement, but absolutely powerful. What's strong with you? And when schools use this data well, it becomes more than just information. It becomes a design tool for instruction, for advising, for goal setting, and for meaningful student reflection. And in the chat, we're going to share a link to learn more about our industry's first strengths assessment designed to help unlock and activate the positive learning identity of each and every student. But here's the key: this work cannot live in isolation. It cannot. It cannot sit in a report or stay within one classroom because the real impact happens when this data becomes part of a larger system. When strengths based data is connected to our shared practice, common language, aligned across our classrooms, our schools, our districts, and embedded into how students experience learning, this is when it becomes scalable. And that's where a scalable whole child approach comes in. Isn't that right, Dr. Marion?
Absolutely. I'm all about sustainability,
Yes,
scalability, and effective implementation that produces positive impact.
absolutely.
And so, as Jasmine stated, this work actually begins with what's strong with you and allowing us to move beyond that deficit mindset and just using strengths-based data one time only. So, how do we actually address this challenge? So, first, we must acknowledge that those standardized approaches often fail because they don't address the unique needs of the whole child. And we've seen in research and in practice that this oftentimes leads to engagement gaps and that tap out potential, right? Oh, I tapped out, I'm no longer interested. And so siloed initiatives we've learned create those inconsistencies across our classrooms and our schools, which makes our visionary goals hard to operationalize. And what we've been able to find in working with educators across the country has really surfaced three specific pillars to success that really relate to this scalable solution, right? So it's one vision, two instruction, three experience. And so evidence of positive impact and scale comes from how we're defining the portrait of a graduate as that magnetic north or that North Star for our community and district. It's also about embedding those conditions for learning. Remember, strengths, well being, hope, and connections. And we're embedding those into our daily learning and teaching practices and our curricular alignment. And lastly, it's about instilling hope as that cognitive trait by setting goals, fostering agency, and creating clear pathways that are made visible and actionable to all in the learning community. And so, Jasmine, can you talk a little bit about how we can do this? Because afterwards, we're going to hear from our practitioners in this space because we can drink this Kool-Aid all day, right?
All
It's
day
all about
long.
how do we see what's actually happening at the state level, at the district levels.
Absolutely. Yes, Dr. Marion. This is where it gets really powerful because now we're not just talking about those conditions, we're actually measuring it. There's no guesswork here. And if you know me, if you've been on a number of webinars with us, you know I love to talk about data and I love to talk about the digital portfolio. And this, again, is honestly one of my favorite parts of the platform, the work that we do here at Thrively. This is the central mechanism. The digital portfolio is where portrait aligned work and the growth becomes visible. It gives students a place to document their work, reflect on their learning, and actually show how they are growing over time. I'm a visual learner. I have to see it, and I love that it's right here in front of me. And this is the shift that actually matters. We move from evidence of effort to now evidence of impact. Students are not just completing assignments anymore. They're building a story of who they are becoming, a story of how their strengths are actually showing up day to day, and a story of how their skills are developing over time. And when we think about portrait of a graduate work, that's the missing piece for so many systems. It's not defining the vision, but how do we make it visible? This is what makes the portrait real for our students. This is what makes it real for us. So here's another opportunity to pause and reflect before we really dig in with our panelists about our special guests around that day-to-day practice. If a school in your district or in your district in your area, if you were asking a student today, asking that student, how do I show the evidence of growth? What would they actually show you? So if I asked a student in my district or at my school, show me your evidence of growth, what would they actually show you? Would they be able to clearly demonstrate their progress in a way that reflects their strengths, their learning, and who are they becoming? Do you think our students can do that at this very moment? Because this is where many systems get stuck. We define the vision, but we don't always make it visible. And that's exactly what we're about to explore as we look at how different systems are bringing their portraits to life. This is exciting. I've been waiting for this for the last 20 minutes, Dr. Marion. Here we are.
No,
How do we
absolutely.
life?
Absolutely. It's all about being able to set that grounding. As we said at the onset, we were going to set the container for providing an understanding of what the research is sharing or telling us. What are those conditions for learning? What are certain resources and tools and strategies that are meeting success for schools and school districts across the country? And now having an opportunity to hear from Dr. Wightman and Jeanine Collins. But what you're seeing here on your screen are two portrait examples specifically from our guest panelists today. So you see the Nevada portrait. I want you to notice the student-centered language, right? How am I thinking? How am I learning? And so this is where the portrait shifts from defined to experience. Students are not just told what matters, they actually reflect on it. And now looking at the district level, you also see the portrait of a graduate for Roosevelt Union Free School District, right? It shifts the focus from what students know to what they become. But here's the key. The power is not in the design. It's in how students actually demonstrate learning and growth. So whether you are early in this work or further along, the question becomes the same. How do we make this visible and experienced by every learner in our system? And that's where we continue to learn from leaders who are actually leading and doing this work every day. And so I want to turn to both Dr. Wightman and Jeanine Collins now to bring this into the conversation. And so one of the questions that I have for both of you to start out our conversation is we're looking at it from the state level and at the district level. And I've had an opportunity to serve as an assistant state superintendent as well as a superintendent. And so my lens may be different than the work that you're leading every day. But Jeanine, if you wouldn't mind talking about like what were some of those key drivers that initiated the Portrait of a Graduate initiative at the state level in Nevada?
Absolutely. I think that it's a great question because I think that the portrait really wasn't a solution in search of a problem, but it was really something that emerged in response to real challenges and questions that our community across the state have been thinking about and grappling with. And this work started uh, kind of kicked off formally in 2022, at the end of 2022. But previous to that, there had been a Blue Ribbon Commission at the state level that was starting to examine how we might reinvent or reinvent learning in response to a lot of questions that the pandemic raised. And as this work moved forward, it became clear that there were three key concepts that were really resonant with communities across our state. One, in the end of 22, early 2023, really thinking about student engagement. Coming back out of the pandemic, how young people were engaged, showing up. Um, it raised all sorts of questions about agency and how we use our time, and having a collective conversation around engagement felt really important in that moment. Two was really in Nevada, the concept around teacher retention. And I think I don't always love that word retention as much as like teacher joy, teacher advancement, professionalism, right? How do educators feel about their work? How are they supported to be professionals? And it was clear that not only was student engagement something that we needed to rethink, but also we really needed to address the role of the educator as a supported and proud professional in our system. And then finally, and these aren't the only things, but these are the three key things, was workforce readiness. We heard from our workforce community that there just was a gap on so many things that really started to sound a lot like the durable skills or the competencies that you're seeing in portraits, things like communication, collaboration, critical thinking. There was, as AI has increased, it's kind of just, ChatGPT really came about as we were building our portrait, and it is only the conversation around AI has only continued to, move exponentially fast. So, thinking about how we thrive in a world of AI, where we are engaged, we are humans that are working together with clear roles and responsibilities and assets, and that we are preparing to engage in a workforce that is relevant for this moment. Were key things that really drove the conversation in Nevada. And I'll just close by saying that while those were drivers, I think the way that we focused the conversation around that were by asking some really beautiful questions like, what is a good life? What is a thriving community? And what is the role of school in helping us get there? And those questions actually helped surface the things that I shared with you, and helped us continue to come back to the opportunity of an education that delivers on this possibility of a thriving community.
No, I do appreciate you sharing that, Jeanine. Before I bring Dr. Wightman into this conversation, a few things that stood out to me when you shared. One is that concept of schooling versus education, right? Asking what should the learning experience be and what is it for? It reminds me of Dr. Jeff Duncan Andretti talking about schooling versus education. When you talked about teacher retention and shifting the language to teacher joy, right? At Thrively, we talk about how do we create a culture of care where we're creating the strengths-based, joyful, and hopeful classrooms. And I was reminded of the work by Dr. Goldie Muhammad, Unearthing Joy. How do we just unearth this joy in this space? And then the last piece you talked about was workforce readiness. One year that is prominent in my mind is the year 2039. And that is the year that our current kindergartners will graduate from high school. And so, how are we preparing them for a world that we don't even know exists or what is in that space? And so, those three things really hit home with me. So, thank you for sharing that. I'm inviting Dr. Wightman into the conversation. So, I'm curious, Dr. Wightman, what motivated your district to begin to embrace the portrait of a graduate work, and how has that journey been so far for you?
Thank you, Dr. Smith. I want to just let everybody know that one thing I will really, in my perspective, to unify a school district, to have a common language. In Roosevelt, all this began with a very simple but powerful question that I just wanted to ask the entire team. What do we want every Roosevelt graduate to know, be able to do, and become when they leave us? That question was something that I asked my elementary level staff, the middle school and high school building, across the entire district. And in Roosevelt, we are still deeply committed to educating the whole child. And our district mission not only is about academic achievement, but it is also about ensuring that every student is prepared to excel, contribute, lead, and thrive in a challenging world. So this whole conversation about the portrait of a graduate gave us a common language to describe that larger vision. Now that everybody has that larger vision, we now have more purpose in our schools in conversations about what does that look like in our elementary buildings? You know, what does this look like now in our middle school and in our high school? And again, the objective and goal is when kids leave, they have all these things that we've taught them or shared with them. And that's a part of our vision with regards to the portrait of the graduate. So I guess I would describe the journey as one of transformation for us here in Roosevelt. We're in our second year, and we're now asking ourselves not only whether students are earning credits or passing assessments as they have in the past, but whether they are becoming empowered, proficient, globally ready citizens who can communicate, collaborate, think critically, demonstrate character, and see themselves as capable of success. And that was really the outcome of all this work right now, is that the success of our students. And I'm actually grateful that we started this last year and we're now just starting to see this happen in our buildings.
No, thank you for sharing that, Dr. Wightman. One thing that stuck out to me when you talked about that is the concept of transformation. And
Yeah.
sometimes that is a scary process because change is inevitable, right? And so, how we're thinking about this work, and we'll have an opportunity to learn a little bit more about what you've been doing in your school district, where the research shows and practice bears out that to engage in this true transformation for change, there's certain things that need to be in place. And I know that we had conversations previously about, how you set the vision, how you provide those skills, how you provide the resources, how you're creating this action plan that builds that momentum in that space. And so look forward to just delving into that a little bit more as well.
Well, I'll say this. One of the most important lessons in this work, and for all of you that are listening, is that a portrait of a graduate cannot be something that is simply handed to a school community. It has to be built with the community, understood by the community, and ultimately owned by the community. And I'm talking about not only just the district, but our families as well. You have to communicate all of this once you do this work. And we've worked to incorporate the voices of teachers, students, families, administrators, and the community members through our conversations, the meetings that we've had, the feedback opportunities, surveys, school-based discussions, and so on. And I think in the end, our families, bringing them into the fold, bring a perspective that we wouldn't necessarily have thinking about this work because they know the hopes, strengths, and live the experiences of our students.
No, thank you for sharing that. And so, one of the things I wanted to talk a little bit about is if I can transition back to you, Jeanine, is I'm curious, what has been your approach to balancing statewide consistency with district-specific flexibility? You told us about the number of county school districts in the state of Nevada. We have a clear vision with the Nevada portrait. However, I'm going to put myself out there right now. As a former superintendent of schools, sometimes I say, yes, I hear what the state may be saying, but I don't know if that's the direction that I want to go, or they're not aware of what the realities are in my space. So, can you talk a little bit about the approaches of balancing the state level work and the individual realities of each of those school districts? Fifth largest school district in the country, Clark County School District, as you said, and then one of the smallest in Esmeralda County.
Yes. So our role in partnership with the Nevada Department of Education when this happened was to really help lead the co-design effort and to just double tap on what I heard Dr. Shawn Wightman say is that you really need to do this with your community. And so I think one of the the smart decisions the state made was that when this work was initiated, it was opt-in across the state. So it was not a mandate. There was a lot, as we all recall, in 2022, 2023, there was a lot happening. And the conversation was one that had a diverse table of invitees. And then there were opportunities that we created for different districts to show up in the build process and actually start piloting as data was coming back in a school design team format. I'm seeing we're talking a lot about creativity and collaboration. I have some bright spot work in my district or in this school that I know of that we can start bringing together into a community of practice and start trying to accelerate this work together. And so, because practitioners have an opportunity to help build this work, practitioners were able to showcase this work to their district leaders at the annual district showcase where superintendents from across our state come together in a space of learning every year. And I share that with you because that learning, the questioning and the learning has really helped advance the work where people have different districts are empowered to have different entry points. We have a recognition that there are different entry points to this work. It could be your multi-tiered systems of support work that's driving you to this conversation. It could be some really excellent results in CTE. It could be a recognition that engagement feels low in some of our academic areas, and we need to rethink with hands-on learning, project-based learning models. But to your point, uh, if you're a superintendent, you've likely got some things you're working on already. And so your entry point needs to be relevant and meaningful to you. So one, if we're going to do portrait work and we believe in agency, which is something that we see this portrait offering, then we need to give people agency in how they step into the work and support from where they step in. And as our work has advanced over the last few years, educators across our state have built learning progressions tied to the competencies on the portrait, which has been really wonderful because it continues, as we heard from Dr. Wightman, continues to clarify what we mean when we say things like collaboration or critical thinking. And what does that look like across from novice to expert? And what does that mean in terms of the relationships and experiences and environments? So we continue to engage district teams and school level teams and communities of practice across our state. We work with our superintendents at their level. And so we really think about engaging all of the layers of the system and learning aligned to the portrait that is relevant to the seat that they're in, and continue to support those initiatives that help the districts advance so that we can build that commonality and lift up what is working to inform policy change at the state level. So we're really linking the different entry points of practitioner voices and models to a shared policy conversation around the kinds of flexibilities, the kinds of supports, the kinds of professional learning, and the kinds of accountability rethinking that we can do as a result. So what I would tell you is that it's not fully linear. It looks a little bit like the squiggly line you had above the person reflecting and thinking, but with multiple points of entry. And in our role, we're able to convene that and lift up common learning and begin to drive that change collectively together.
That is so good and so powerful. And what you're naming, Jeanine, is exactly what makes his work so meaningful when you think about when it's not done to a community, but built with the community. Like that's it. I was like in a aha moment there. And I would love to be able to now take that momentum and go into our next question and just start with you, Dr. Whiteman. What strategies have you found most effective in maintaining the momentum and enthusiasm around this initiative among staff and students?
Yeah, I will tell you this. In K-12, in the work that we just did, I've found three that I think have a major impact on the work. Alignment is one, repetition with purpose, and then, of course, you want to celebrate examples of the portrait in action. Um, and I'll go in order. The most effective strategy has been alignment for me, in my perspective, here in this district. The initiatives lose momentum when people see them as separate from the real work that they do. Everybody in the room right now, talking right now, I know you have to be thinking about that, just that statement alone, you said, you know what, that makes complete sense. Uh, so we've worked here in Roosevelt to connect the portrait of our strategic plan, our Board of Education goals, instructional priorities, school improvement work. All of that is in alignment with this portrait, including student recognition, family engagement, and leadership conversations. This is all we focus in on. Okay. Repetition with purpose is another important strategy when you do this work. You're going to find that, you're going to use the language of the portrait of a graduate with board updates, staff conversations, presentations and meetings and recognitions. And if you don't do that, you should do that, because not only is it being lived, it's being realized, with what you're doing with staff and students in the district. So that repetition matters because it helps the portrait become part of the district's culture rather than, a one-time rollout. And then the last thing I just want to share is we also try to celebrate examples of the portrait in action. So when students demonstrate leadership, perseverance, creativity, service, academic growth, and so on, you name it. When teachers design meaningful learning experiences, we connect that work back to the portrait. So when departments make decisions, we ask how those decisions support the whole child and how they relate to the portrait. You have to celebrate those examples. That could be at a board meeting, at a staff meeting. It could be even in a newspaper article or, a radio slot. You just want to make sure you promote it. So those are the three strategies that I've found to be, very effective with regards to the initiative in developing this work.
I love that so much. I think one of the things that stuck out, there's that repetition with purpose there, that really helps move from a moment to a system. Like when it's consistent and intentional, it really becomes a part of the culture and not just that one time experience. And I do think that leads to just a partnership that we have with Thrively with Roosevelt Union Free School District and how we have been intentional throughout this academic year to be able to have just, again, the repetition with the purpose, our touch points, our strengths assessment data, and how we've been able to really amplify this work that we are doing in the district through our partnership together. So I've really enjoyed working with Roosevelt Union and just learning so much from the district, the culture, and what the systems that are now back in place to be able to move this work forward. So thank you so much, Dr. Wightman, for sharing. And Jeanine, I'd love to give you an opportunity just to answer the same question there.
Jasmine, what do you want me to
Yeah,
answer?
absolutely.
There are so
Absolutely.
many great things he said. I was like, which way should I vote?
No, 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 no worries. So, just what strategies have you found most effective in maintaining the momentum and the enthusiasm around the initiative, from the state level?
Yeah, so I think at the state level, I think some of the things that we learned about as we were building the work, and thinking about it from a state level perspective was just the recognition that sometimes work like this can shift, adjust, start, or stop based on leadership transitions. So one, really stepping into the role of a statewide intermediary to support ongoing convening at the intersection of community policy and practice has been important. Two, at a state level, we've been really fortunate to move a legislative commission forward in Nevada. It's called the Commission on Innovation and Excellence in Education, which engages partners at all levels of our system, from students to educators to workforce leaders, who are doing the deeper work of rethinking the system with the portrait at the center, using that common language, that common vision, and that common recognition about what we need to invest in terms of world-class learning and teaching pathways, how we think about workforce and career connected learning experiences across the continuum, and certainly how we begin to rethink measuring what matters when we talk about these important durable skills. So that's creating some sustainability and really driving momentum, because as we built this work initially with educators, Dr. Marion said it right at the beginning. This is in the hearts, and maybe you did too, Jasmine. Like, this is the kind of work that is in the hearts and minds of educators to do. And it sometimes feels out of sync with the way our systems are designed or what we feel like we're being asked to do and report on. And so bringing that sense of clarity, coherence, and alignment to those conversations, that is authentic from the field with models of what it looks like in action and what it can look like to bring that together through our networking strategy has really helped create the momentum. People love to learn from each other. It's fun, it's joyous, and you see something different in another context, and you're saying, "Oh my gosh, your district is so much smaller or larger than mine, and yet I can learn this too." And you can talk about the challenges of implementing that work, and there's energy in people learning and building together. And that has really helped move the momentum forward.
Thank you so much, Jeanine. That was fantastic. I'm watching the time, and we said we would be honorable of everyone's time. So, as we begin to wrap up our panel discussion, I just want to give you both an opportunity to leave us with one final thought here. If there's one message you want leaders to walk away with as they think about sustaining this work, what would it be?
I'll just jump in here. I want to just let everybody know this. When you go into and do this work, the most important thing is not only to think about what it is that you want out of your kids once they graduate and leave your district, but the other piece is if you expect your students these things are these outcomes that you're going to develop, if you expect them to be that when they leave, you also have to be that. Like, let me give you an example. A few months ago, I left to go to Guatemala to give a high school diploma to a young man that got deported. One of the characteristics we want out of our students here in Roosevelt when they leave and they graduate is for them to be courageous leaders. So, who am I as a superintendent expecting my staff to work towards this work with our students and expecting our students to become this when they leave if I myself do not believe and follow through with those same ideals? So that's one of the reasons why I left here to go over there and do that, to be courageous, to demonstrate that work with regards to the school community and even the kids that have left here and have gone on to do other things in life. So when you do this work, just make sure that you apply what it is you expect your students to be with what it is that you do with them.
Thank you so much. That's so good. That courageous leadership. Oh, disrupting everything. I love that. And Jeanine?
Yeah, I really like that. Sometimes we'll say in our work, you can't do the you can't just do the portrait. You have to be the portrait. And when you're gonna go, there's shifts in thinking that really are helpful to have as you start to implement this work. And sometimes, like, new thinking can sometimes cause tension. And I think asking the kinds of questions that open up a multiplicity of possibilities when you're going after this work, that you're willing to open up and create a space where you can grapple with those questions together is what builds those durable skills that we're collecting evidence on. And so I think if there's one thing I could offer is that the product of the portrait is the poster, right? But as you all have said, it's really the relationships, experiences, and environments for the students that makes the impact. And we get there by really rethinking the process of how we do this work together and creating those spaces where we're really learning, we're challenging our assumptions, we're maybe shifting some of our paradigms about the work that we're doing. And so I would just invite folks to really think about how they can create a space for that kind of, as you all said, learning, unlearning, and relearning to happen so that you can actually experience what it means to develop those skills. And that's where the tension and the joy and the real, I think, fun of this work comes into play is in the how.
I love that. And even with the how and understanding that this work does not start with doing everything, it's that clear entry point, having the entry point, identifying the entry point, and we believe it's just starting with strengths, using the data that we already have, choose one move within a classroom, a team, or even just at a school, and just really begin building from there. Because I echo what Dr. Marion said earlier, this isn't about adding something new. It's about really making what we already have matters, making it visible, aligned, and consistent for every single one of our learners that we, have relationships with and that we, really spend time with each and every day. So, Dr. Marion, can you walk us through some next steps and resources to really support this work?
No, absolutely, Jasmine. I want to thank Dr. Wightman and
Yeah.
Jeanine Collins. I'm sitting here taking notes, right? I'm always a listener and a learner as well as a teacher as well. What stood out to me is you have to be the work, right? You have to lead also from the seat that you're in. I've heard this work is not linear. Being able to focus on what are the possibilities in this space, right? And then to create that courageous, transformative space to be able to move it forward. And so we invite all of you as you reflect on what has been shared today, just to think about a few actionable items that may begin to inform your next right step. We don't need to know the full plan, but what is the next right step? So you could possibly begin by assessing your current progress. So ask yourself, like, to what extent are those competencies visible in daily classroom interactions? And where do they remain just words on a poster? A possible next right step could be prioritizing strengths and student voice, right? By shifting the focus from that deficit to the asset. So ensuring that students are actual co-designers of the process, because we've learned that their lived experiences are the most authentic measure of whether our portrait work is actually coming to life. Another point that could lead to our work is, like, really think about those things and, like, I would say, think about choosing one manageable area just to really deepen your impact, right? So this could be possibly reviewing a single grade level curriculum or revising one rubric that could actually align to a specific graduate competency. Or another right next step could just be simply using those digital tools and resources from Thrively that we talked about to be able to scale your efforts, right? Focusing on how are you creating, maximizing the positive impact of those conditions for learning, right? Strengths, well being, hope, and connections.
So, Dr. Marion, if they want to use those digital resources from Thrively, and we think about putting today's learning to practice, we just want to make sure that you leave not just with ideas, but with something you can actually use right away. So, inside Thrively, on the right side of your dashboard, you'll find the Teacher Resource Center. And this space is intentionally designed to connect directly to everything that we have explored today. It gives you ready to use tools that really help you bring this life and this work into life in your classroom. So you can use it to support strengths-based learning and everyday instruction, guiding students' goal setting and reflections, that digital portfolio, and just creating more intentional conversations around student progress, whether that is an advisory, MTSS, or your just everyday classroom routine. So instead of asking, where do I start tomorrow? You have a place to begin. So the goal is not to remember everything from today. There were so many great nuggets, but the goal is to really take one step and have the tools to support it, because real change does not come from a single moment like this. It comes from what happens after. And I really believe that it happens in our classrooms, in conversations, and in those small, consistent decisions that shape how students experience learning. So as you continue this work, we also want to make sure you know what conversations are coming up next. So, Dr. Marion, we have two more amazing webinars to round out this academic year. Please tell us a little bit more information about it.
Absolutely. So on your screen, you'll see two of those upcoming sessions. And these are conversations that are going to feature school district leaders, superintendents, our Thrively ambassadors, and other Thrively educators who are actually doing the work, very similar to Jeanine Collins and Dr. Wightman, who are doing the work in real time. So if today's conversation sparked interest or ideas or questions for you, these upcoming webinar sessions are designed to take that learning even deeper. So each of these webinars are going to continue to explore the concepts of strengths-based learning, student well-being, and how to actually turn data, that whole child assessment data, into insights so you can have that meaningful action in your classrooms and across your systems. But I think the most important part about our webinars as we end this school year is you're going to continue to hear directly from practitioners about what this work actually looks like in schools. And if you have a colleague or leaders in your building or in your overall system who you think could benefit from these conversations, we encourage you to share this opportunity with them. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to Jasmine to help us close out our time together.
Absolutely. And thank you all again for joining us today. Thank you, a special thank you to our special guests as well. And truly thank you all for the work that you do for our students and our families. We see it, we see you, we actually appreciate it. And if questions come up later or you would like to continue the conversation, there's still an opportunity to add some questions in the chat or the Q&A box, but also please feel free to reach out to us directly because we welcome that connection. You can follow Thrively on LinkedIn, on Facebook, and on X, and we would love to stay connected to your work. So as you begin to, apply what we discussed today, we also invite you to share those experiences. Tag us, tell us your stories, and allow us to celebrate alongside you as your students grow and thrive. And as we close, I want to bring us back to where we started. A Portrait of a Graduate is powerful because it names what we believe students are capable of becoming, but the impact comes when that vision is connected to daily learning, student reflection, meaningful data, and evidence of growth. That is the movement from poster to practice to positive impact. So, again, thank you for joining us for the work you're already doing and for continuing to build those learning environments where every child is seen through their strengths and supported to thrive. So, you can also visit thrively.com/classrooms for free resources, research insights, the Teacher Resource Center, and practical tools that you can begin using right away. And we'll also share a link in the chat with an opportunity, again, to refer your principal or colleagues or your district leader to Thrively, including access to a potential pilot, because this work grows stronger when entire school communities are engaged in this process. So, as you return to your classrooms and to your schools, we want to leave you with one question: what's strong with you? Because that question does more than just shift a conversation, it begins to shift culture. So, until next time, let's continue humanizing learning together. Let's continue creating strength space, joyful, and hopeful learning environments that strengthen student outcomes. Thank you all again so much for your time today. And until next time.